I spent most of my adult life in jail and working in jails. I retired as a lieutenant from the sheriff's office, and I have a story to tell you, or a conversation I want to have with you about jails. There's approximately 700,000 people at any given time in American jails, and there's more than 3,000 jails in America. And there's two things that I want you to remember when we have this conversation. One is that the condition of confinement is not the punishment, meaning just being in jail, if you're convicted of a crime, that's the punishment. You're separated from your community, you're separated from your family, your friends, from participating in life. That's the punishment. The punishment is not harsh conditions. The other thing I want you to remember is that the way we treat people in jail really speaks more to what kind of people we are rather than what kind of people they are. And I think with those two things in mind, we can have this conversation. So jail's a jarring experience. When you go to jail, you probably rode there in the back of a police car, you were handcuffed, you were probably searched. When you were arrested, you got to the jail, you were probably searched again. You might even been strip searched in the jail. You were processed, you were cataloged. They took information from you, they took your fingerprints, they took your pictures. They told you when you could use a phone, when you couldn't use a phone, where to sit, where not to sit, and when to go in the cell so they could lock the door. And we call that locking down. You have no control over your environment. This environment that you're living in jail now, it's jarring. But there's something else happening when you go to jail. Jail's an emotional experience as well. Because when you go to jail, you take a step out from society. What's going to happen to my family? Am I going to see my family again? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to be able to work in the morning? What's going to happen to me? And are these charges that they've leveled against me, are these charges going to mean that I'm going to stay in jail for a longer period of time, or maybe even go to prison for the rest of my life? How is this going to affect me? How are people in the community going to see me after me going to jail? It's an emotional experience. Jails are like small communities. They're little cities, and they have all the services that you have in your community. And the people in jail, the populations in jail, are divided into smaller groups to manage and care for their custody. The largest group is general population. So general population is like dorm living. For the most part, you can come out, you can talk to other people, you can watch TV, play board games, you might be able to go to programs. It could be parenting programs, educational programs, they might be physical programs, that type of thing. You have some time out with other people. At night, you're probably going to lock down in a cell either by yourself or with somebody else, but for the most part, you're going to be out with other people. Male and female inmates aren't housed together, they're housed in separate parts of the jail. We have inmate workers in the jail, and inmate workers are people who do the work in the jail. They do the cleaning, and they do the preparation of meals and the serving of meals. And they do this in exchange for what's called good time. And that means that they get to leave jail, hopefully, a little earlier before their sentence is over. And there's another positive to doing this. They have a distraction because, remember, we talked about the physical environment of being in jail, and that's a stress. And then the emotional environment of being in jail, all the emotional things that you're dealing with, that's another stressor. And having something positive to do or to take your mind off of these things while you're in jail is a good thing. We have another group that is high security admin segregation inmates. And high security admin segregation inmates, these are people that are in jail within jail. Generally, high security inmates are inmates that come to jail with a history of violence, history of escape attempt, or perhaps when they came to jail, they were threatening to be violent. Admin segregation inmates are inmates who have a hard time following the rules, and there's like 1 billion rules in jail. You have to wear your shirt and your clothes correctly, you have to clean your room, you have to follow directions, you have to not backtalk. There's a bunch of rules that you have to follow in jail, and it's difficult, it's hard. And some people just can't do that. They just can't follow all these rules that are in this jail. So they find themselves moved to the high security area, the jail within jail, and they're there with the high security inmates. And let's talk about what this area looks like. A lot of steel, a lot of concrete. The doors are called sliders. That means that they're mechanical doors. They're operated by staff who are sitting remotely behind plexiglass. There's not a lot of entertainment in these areas. There's not a lot to do. People are generally on lockdown up to 23 hours a day. So if you want to know what that's like, when you go home today, go in your bathroom, shut the door, first remove everything out of your bathroom, shut the door, and sit there for the next 24 hours, and you'll have an idea what that feels like. Maybe. It's a harsh place to be. It's a harsh place to live. The inmates are not able to interact with other inmates, and they're not interacting with other human beings. There comes a point when people have all this stress on them. They're living in this high security area, they're in jail, and they're dealing with just the predicament, the emotional predicament of being in jail, and they don't have any control over their lives, and they want to exhibit some control over their lives. So the way they do it is they might tell staff, I'm not going to do what you asked me to do. The deputy may say, I need you to lock down. I need you to go in your room and close the door. Not today. I'm not going to lock down. I'm not going to do what you say. I know that I'm not going to have a positive outcome, but for the next few minutes, I'm in control of my world. I'm in control of my life. And they say, no, not today. And how do we respond in law enforcement? We respond with force. We get a team together. They're dressed in black. They have equipment. They have helmets on. They have shields. And they go up the stairs. Our high security in our jail was called 2 North. North side of the building, second floor. They take the stairs up. They enter the pod. They confront the inmate. 5 deputies looking at the inmate. They're giving the inmate instructions. Go in that room and lock down. And they follow it up by one sentence. They say, if you don't, force will be used against you. And maybe on this day, the inmate's just had enough, and he says, do your worst. And you have 500 pounds of deputies slamming into this inmate, pinning him to the wall, pinning him to the ground, putting him in restraints, taking him out to another part of the jail, or maybe even putting him in a restraint chair. And I can remember after one of these situations talking to an inmate in booking who had been removed, extracted from this pod, and he looked up at me and he said, my life is just over. My life is over. I got nothing. Because to him, all his trips to jail, the environmental conditions of living in this high security pod, and the emotional things that he was going through by being in jail, it was just too much. And he couldn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. Our area, our high security area, is called 2 North, as I said, and we were having problems in this area, and as we had problems, and the problems looked like disturbances. Inmates would flood their rooms, or they'd bang on the door, they refused to lock down, and the problems were getting worse and worse, and this was in 2012. And I was called in one night at 2 o'clock in the morning as a operations lieutenant to deal with the disturbance, and I get to the pod, and there's 2 inches of water in the pod. There are things that I can't identify floating around in the water. There are inmates yelling and screaming. It just feels out of control. And I just think to myself, we just can't live like this. We just can't continue like this. Because in the past, all we did in response to this is we just were more strict. We got bigger sticks. No more time out of your room. No more this. No more that. That's how we responded to it. I said, we just can't do that anymore. When I was asked what we're going to do, I remember what my father always told me. He said, rather than curse the darkness, light a candle. So I started looking at the pod differently. I went into the pod. One of my staffs brought up to me, said, the TVs are too small. They're 60-inch TVs, and they're covered in plexiglass, and they're hard to see, and they're hard to see. It's something you would see in like a 1980s prison movie. It's just, and the screen would roll. It was ridiculous. I said, we're going to get widescreen TVs, flat screen TVs. And my staff thought I lost my mind. You're You're coddling inmates. You can't give them flat screen. No flat screen TVs. It's in the Constitution. Well, here's a news flash. Go find a 16-inch box TV, okay? Good luck. So we got flat screen TVs that they could actually see, and we put those in the pods. And then we got earbuds, and I gave them radios so that they had something to listen to. They could listen to music, and when they were in their rooms locked down, they could listen to the TV on this radio. They had a distraction, not a big deal, but it was a distraction from what their world was, their emotional world was, and their physical world was. And then I asked my staff, I said, I want you to start having conversations with the inmates. And this is what a conversation looks like. At the end of your shift, I want you to give each of these inmates a report card. I want you to tell them you had a good day and why, because we don't tell people they had a good day in jail. We never go up and say, hey, you had a great day in jail. But I want you to tell them they had a good day and this is why. Or if they had a bad day, I want you to tell them to their face, you had a bad day in jail, and this is why you had a bad day. Because in the past, what we did when they asked how to get out of their predicament, how to change their status, how to get out of the area, is we did this song and dance in front of their door. We said, we're going to write down some information on your behavior, and we're going to pass this on to the classification board, and they're going to look at it, and they're going to run it through some matrix, and they're going to make a decision. We weren't telling them anything. We were just doing this stupid song and dance in front of their doors, and they were frustrated, and they should have been frustrated. But now they knew if they had 3 bad days or more, their status wasn't going to change. Everyone knew that. They knew that. We knew that. Everyone knew that. If they had less than that, their status was going to change. It was transparent. We had a rule that said only 2 inmates could be out at one time. And this was in response to a riot that occurred a decade before. It was a security measure to limit the amount of people that were out. But the problem was, with only 2 people out at a time, even if your status had changed and you had more privileges, you couldn't exercise your privileges because you could only let 2 people out at once. So I said, we're going to let 4 people out again. And what did my staff say? You can't do this. You're coddling inmates. This is wrong. You can't do this. We're going to have a security incident. We're going to have a disturbance. We're going to have a riot. No, what we had was better behavior. Because as corny as it sounds, people really do need people. They need to be around other people. They need to talk to other people. They need to interact with other people. You can't live in a box. You can't live in a box. So in a year's time, we went from running up and down those stairs with a response team 15 times to the following year 5 times. We went from spending $50,000 a year in money for response teams and equipments and bigger sticks and workers' compensation, injuries and damage to spending $5,000 a year. Did we change the way we manage inmates? Yeah, we did. I think we really did change the way that we manage inmates. Did we change the inmates' behavior? Well, certainly in the short term, we did change the inmates' behavior because we got better behavior. People who had previously been in this area for 60 and 70 and 80 and 100 days were out in 20 days or 25 days instead of those long periods of time. But the most important takeaway for us, or at least for me, was the change was in us. We changed the way that we dealt with other human beings. We changed the way that we interacted with other human beings. We did something that was not the industry standard. We went the other direction, 180 degrees. And these little change in this communication with these other human beings, we were able to see huge effects in this area. Deputies who normally didn't want to work in this area, all of a sudden they wanted to work in this area. It became a choice area to work in. Thank you.